Welcome back to the Mythic Dungeon International. Only 2 teams left remaining here as we go into the grand finals. My name's Jack, and joining me on the desk is Sloot, Nagura, and Sours. And guys, we're finally here to start seeing 2 of the best teams the Eastern region has to offer to us. We've seen them go against each other once and go into the 3 games. Sloot, who do you have taking this?
I think Team D here. I mean, they're so well rehearsed, and they had, both teams have definitely had a bit more practice right now, but the series they had before versus each other was so close all 3 games. In my opinion, wasn't super indicative of the champions, battle for champion there. So I think anyone can take it, but I think Team D is just, I don't know, they seem to get better and better with every map they do. What
do you think about that one, Nagura?
I'm actually going to go for a battle for champions because just because of, Team D sticking to their DK this whole time, even though they did play really well around the DK, but in some dungeons, you're just going to be slower. I think that's also why they lost before, just because they were a little bit slower on the bosses, that had less single target damage, and I think that's going to cost them in this series as well.
What do you think, Sours, on this one? Temple, Sethraliss doesn't have a lot of trash density here if they're sticking with the DK.
Yeah, I still think that it's going to be either a 2-0 by Team D, or they'll do a 1-2 reverse sweep by Team D. On paper, they should win. They did have better times in both time trial dungeons, which are going to be maps 2 and 3 of this series. So I do think Team D is favored to win here.
Team D has had a lot of improvements throughout their time trials, now going into the actual games here in the tournament here. So a lot of improvements that are going on there. We haven't quite seen as substantial of improvements from Battle for Champion going forward into it. So first game is going to be that fortified bursting quaking here on Temple of Sethraliss. Nagura, we saw a lot of times there where going into Galvas's room, dealing with those lightning elementals has really been the bane of a lot of healers.
Most definitely, and we've seen Battle for Champ actually play this map before, Temple. Now, they did have a pretty big mistake at the very end of the dungeon, even though they ended up winning anyway, but they did pull the trash when they were trying to do a Shadow Melt skip. So hopefully they're going to clean up this small mistake that they did the last time and, to do well against Team D.
Prize money and points for LAN on the line here as Team D has that 80% advantage from Twitch chat going into it. This is going to be game 1 in the grand finals of the Mythic Dungeon International Eastern region.
Look at that, Nagura. 80% of chat disagrees with your choice there.
What are we betting?
We'll just have to see how this works out. So, yeah, we haven't seen the performance from Team D on this map, and certainly with the caliber and level that these teams played off in the series that they faced each other, I mean, just like you said, they really have to clean up any small mistakes that we saw from Battle for Champion. But here we go as both teams row it downstairs with the mass stealth, leading into a huge pack pull. Bloodlust coming up on both sides, and just huge amounts of damage chunking the group on Team D side. We are on a bursting volcanic affix right now, and we see that Tree of Life spam coming out of Battle for Champion already.
Yeah, so similar pulls coming in from both, but we see the tank just drops so low on top of this quaking, but the healer Jack doing a very good job at keeping everyone alive with this Tree of Life. But yeah, just very scary pull here on top of 45, so the trash is doing so much damage, but also bursting, so you have to handle it very well. Oh, he drops so low. This is so close from Battle for Champion coming out here, and also quaking, just making everything so much more difficult.
Yeah, Jack does manage to heal everybody up. There goes the Tranquility now. Cuts it off halfway as they want to hurry down the stairs with the trash dying. Team D kind of on the back pedal here right now as they're forced to deal with the rest of the trash here a bit more defensively. We see some line of sight play coming out of the tank right now as with the Unholy DK helps grip those marksmen in that are stationary mobs. Very difficult to move just because they're kind of ranged physical mobs, so they just tend to shoot their target unless they're line of sight. Both rogues don't have cheat death available to them on the side of Team D as well. Battle for Champion now dealing with their first reaping pack here on the side, and they have pulled Adderus and aspects with it as well.
Yeah, so Battle for Champion just dealing with this first pull so much faster. Jack dropping very, very low again. But yeah, this first pull, you would think that Team D would be the team that does this pull because they have the DK, they have this huge AoE damage. But Battle for Champion just risking so much, and it's paying off for them. It was very close, but they didn't manage to pull it off. Now they did pull the boss, and they have 1 death coming in. They have a battle res, so they can recover, but it's quaking as well.
Oh, this is so sketchy for them right now. The battle res is available, but he's just struggling to get everybody healthy. One of the Both rogues now have cheat death proc. One of them does go down, and it looks like we might have a full team wipe as the warrior runs up in order to reset this boss so they can go at it again. Now, they have probably wasted some offensive cooldowns here, but of course, no bloodlust as they used it on the trash. So a lot of hiccup here as Team D finally pulls this boss as well. Adderus just pulled away from Aspix, wanting to make sure that you don't cleave on top of the boss with the active lightning shield, getting that damage reflected back onto you. But I mean, Battle for Champion, a bit of a sloppy display here because they also had a marksman on the side shooting them along with the boss that they had pulled.
I do believe they were trying to pull those Shadowed Fangs that are stealthing around the boss room, so you need to make sure you detect them and pull them on top of the group before you pull the boss. But someone probably accidentally pulled the boss while doing so, and of course having trash and the boss at the same time in the settings is way too difficult to handle. And while they are not engaged, like while the bosses are not engaged, they're actually charging around the room. So maybe something like that happened, that they were trying to pull the Shadow Fangs and something cleaved on top of the boss as he was charging around, and it just cost them so much time now.
Bosses finally are engaged. This duo right now, we'll have to find out when the wedding is just a bit later. But Adder is pulled off to the side, wanting, again, just to make sure you don't get any of that cleave damage. But, Nigger, you know, we noticed earlier as well, one of the two rogues on Battle for Champion that went down first also ate one of the Shadow Smashes from the Reaping Wave. So a bit of sloppy play coming in here as one of the rogues dips quite low. Tree of Life getting busted out here for Battle for Champion as they spam the players back to health and they start working on Aspix. Of course, now Adderus does have the lightning shield on them, so you want to make sure you're not cleaving on top of that, and players are moving together to start to bait this kind of arrow 100 per energy cast coming in from Adderus before they swap shields again.
Yeah, so we can see the arrow coming in. Adderus is going to charge around now as his lightning shield is on him, and he's kind of doing his passive abilities. Now, depending on who's got the lightning shield, they will do their active or passive abilities. Now, Adderus is without the lightning shield now, meaning that he is going to do the active abilities, which is not, to be honest, not that dangerous, except the Cyclone Strike that we've just seen, which will target a random player and cast cyclones in a cone in front of them. So you just need to make sure that you see which player is getting targeted and then just move on the other side of the boss.
No surprise here that Adderus dies first for Team D, as they did manage to engage the boss before Battle for Champion had to re-engage the boss, because they did have to have that reset so they didn't face the full team wipe. Battle for Champion now has downed Adderus as well, working on Aspix, just about 20% behind on this half boss as Team D works to finish it off and get ready to move down the gauntlet. Going to be really interesting to see, especially out of Team D, what they decide to skip in this dungeon. It is a fairly linear dungeon, but having two rogues with Shroud, Mass Shroud, will kind of open up what packs you can skip, Nagura.
Yeah, we actually see, if you look at the HP, Battle for Champion almost caught up. They killed the boss at the very same time, just because they have more single target damage, right? We see a little bit of sloppy play of both of those teams already, which is so uncharacteristic, because in the last couple of series they had, pretty much ran through the dungeons with 0 deaths, but now already at the very start of this dungeon we have 2 deaths on Battle for Champion side and 3 deaths on Team D side. Now they're still, you know, since both of the teams made those small mistakes, they're on the same level now. They're pretty much at the exact same time in the dungeon.
We can see speed potions being used here for Battle for Champion as they want to maximize the distance that they cross with that Shroud. Skipping that middle pack with the double Crawlus Grider, just a lot of damage and a lot of incoming damage on the tank that's unnecessary. The tank does, the Pro Warrior does charge down the hill, kind of combining the top pack that has one of those sand encrusted snakes in it. Now, particularly irritating mob as it will drop a kind of sand cloud on the ground that prevents line of sight and mobs getting hit to it. So you want to make sure you kill that right away before you get too much damage prevented from your team. Crawlus Rider coming in here for Battle for Champion as well, and I think this is what's going to make or break some of the teams, how big they pull in this second boss room.
Yeah, we've seen some of the Western teams actually save their bloodlust for this exact moment and just pull the whole room. Now, this is something that I would have expected from Team D, because they do have this unholy DK, so those big pulls would be worth it. But they also use their bloodlust at the very start, so we're probably not going to see something scary as pulling like the whole room, but I assume they're going to do it in 2 to 3 pulls.
We, of course, don't have the trinket for the cheat death available on the Warrior on Battle for Champion. We can see that a little Bwan Samdi debuff on the frame there. Team D just moving over to kind of do a fairly modest pull, as you said. They're just finishing it up here. Perhaps they're rearing up for a remaining boss room pull here, and then combining that 40% reaping wave on top of the boss. So Warrior does leap into action on the far side, grabs the final Crawless Rider, as we can see at the top there. But once again, a pretty small pull here. Incubator is not too dangerous. They will splash random poison on members that can be dispelled or reflected should it hit the Prot Warrior. We see a couple of applications there, one on Eastian, one on the other Rogue as well. But the Tenders really, I guess, are the most irritating mob in here, as they will cast frequent heals on random kind of enemies that they have nearby, and also try to absorb these eggs for a small heal and an increased buff to them. Battle for Champion, not to be outdone, actually does end up pulling what looks like the whole room. Oh, there's still a couple of mobs in the back.
Yeah, pretty big pull coming in here as they proc their second reaping wave, pulling pretty much most of the room here at the same time. Very scary as we see the tank dropping so low because of those 45 mobs. As we see all the poisons going out as well on the team that need to be dispelled and just out-healed if the healer runs out of dispels. But we see the tree form popped as well by Jack and the Inner Bay, just spamming those instant regrowths on the team to make sure they stay alive. Now, one thing to note is the bursting management by Battle for Champions. We've seen some very big pulls by them, and just very, very good management of bursting, just making sure it never goes above 3 stacks and no refreshing at all.
So bursting is probably one of the limiting factors and scare factors for these two teams for not wanting to pull the entire room here, but the reaping does get combined with the remainder of the room here for Team D, as we see a cheat death proc out of one of the two rogues for Team D. Unfortunately got hit by one of the kind of AoE swirlies there. Long finally stabilizing, pulling the remaining mobs onto the side there, the remainder of the reaping, that is the 40% reaping, 53% on the board for them, and Battle for Champion 55% on the trash board as they engage Merektha, the second boss of the dungeon, both teams at 90% apiece.
Yeah, so this boss, not that scary, especially not on Fortified. But yeah, in the very first phase, as you see here, you have to be careful with the frontal breath that the boss does. It will target a random member and will breath a frontal cone, leaving those green pools behind. So you need to make sure that you drag the boss to the side of the room and all the members are standing to the edge and not to the middle, so the whole room is not covered in the green pools.
So we see here, of course, the Nimbus being pulled beyond the gate towards the third boss's trash. We've seen pretty much every team, West and East included, pull this Nimbus on top of the boss. There's just so much downtime with the boss, especially during the transitions at 70 and 40%, that they're trying to be as efficient as possible and have something to cleave in the meantime. They do get it down finally as Merektha re-emerges for her second phase, but particularly the easiest phase of this encounter. She just sits there casting Blinding Sand frequently, and players really just need to turn around before the cast finishes so that they don't get disoriented.
Yeah, so in the second phase here, the boss does not do the frontal breath anymore, so they can pretty much stand wherever they want as long as they make sure they turn around. Now it's the second intermission phase where we see those snakes coming out again. Very important to do to interrupt their clouds that they're casting. If it goes through it non-interrupted without a stun or a typhoon, they will spawn those clouds on the floor, which actually make you miss all of your abilities, not just damage abilities, but also knockbacks or something. So you need to wait until they're kited out, which can take a long time.
Right, you are, Nagura, this similar to the ones that we saw on the trash earlier. Merektha getting ready here to re-emerge at 42%, where she will combine both types of abilities, both the Blinding Sands and, of course, that Noxious Breath, that you want to make sure that you kind of aim towards the outside of the room and that you're moving after, so that that poison that pulses from her doesn't get you trapped with the model of snakes. Otherwise, you'll need to either be stunned or they can be feared or just DPS. But if you kind of get rooted in that poison, it could be pretty detrimental. 10% on Merektha for Battle for Champion and 25 for Team D. Team D moving a fair bit slower on her. As we saw both teams when they pulled, they were only 1-2% apart. So I guess just showing the single target prowess of having that Windwalker Nagura for Battle for Champion.
Yeah, definitely. Just, having this extra single target damage means quite a bit for a Battle for Champion, especially because those two teams are so close to one another. They're both, as we see, one of the rogues actually failing the lightning game here, but it shouldn't be a problem for him to come back. Now, we'll probably see a very big pull coming out of Battle for Champions here, as they do have the Bloodlust ready, and they're probably going to pull all the dervishes here, and it's going to be a really risky pull. Oh,
they're dervishes now, are they? As they pull the one in the corner. It looks like they're actually going half and half, so they're going to be 3 plus the Nimbus. They want to save, I suppose, their Bloodlust, rather, for Galvas, the third boss in here, which is, even in a fortified setting, a particularly daunting and dangerous boss. Team D has actually pulled the Nimbus and the Imbued Stormcallers on the way to that kind of lightning game that Nagura mentioned earlier. Not a pull that we really typically see. I actually don't think we've seen anybody pull the second Nimbus between the two cups over the past couple of weekends here. So interesting pull from them. I'm curious to see what they're opting to skip later as a result. But 3 dervishes here pulled for Battle for Champion. They deal with the first 3. You can just see how dangerous they are as they've still not killed it off completely, and the group is just now getting healthily healed up by Jack. Bloodlust finally goes off. We saw them do this last time they ran the dungeon as they re-engage the second set of dervishes and the 60% reaping wave.
Yeah, reaping on top of the dervishes, just so much damage. That's why we see the Bloodlust come out and the Tree of Life, of course, from Jack, the Rasta Druid. Now, one thing, Team D not pulling the Nimbus to the second boss, which is one thing that it doesn't really make sense, right? Because pulling the Nimbus into the second boss phase, as you said, there's just so much downtime and so much time to DPS the Nimbus. All you have to do is interrupt it. I mean, yeah, the Nimbus does AoE damage, but the boss itself doesn't really do that much. So it's very effective to do so. So I don't really like this pull that they did without not taking the Nimbus into the boss fight and just pulling it afterwards with the Stormcaller. Doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, not a huge fan of this. And, you know, they did a really modest pull with their 60% reaping wave here. They just pulled an extra Nimbus with it as well. My only guess here is that they're going to pull all 6 dervishes together here in a second. They don't want the Nimbus extra damage while potentially still trying to save their Bloodlust. Nonetheless, we see them finally rear up and run into the room. The first 2 dervishes are aggroed, and we see a grip come in on the 3rd dervish from the corner, but it looks like they're only dealing with 3 of them as well. So for me, certainly unexpectedly modest pull coming out of Team D here as Battle for Champion looking to clean up the remainder of some of the trash on the side and get ready to engage Galvast. Now they're just dealing with the Stormcaller here because there is a bit of RP role-playing involved with Galvast's spawn, so they just want to make sure that they're efficient.
Yeah, pretty efficient pulls coming from Battle for Champion here. Now, as you said, Team D a little bit... We're not really used to that kind of stuff because in the past we've seen them utilize their DK a lot, doing those big pulls whenever the DK had his cooldowns ready, making use of this huge AoE burst of the DK. So, you know, just surprising by Team D that they're doing so modest pulls. But now Battle for Champion actually engaging Galvast here, which is, as we mentioned, a very dangerous boss fight, even on Fortified.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really scary... Name of the game here is you want to make sure you intercept these lightning beams from the spires that spawn randomly around the arena. It will give you 9 stacks of increasing nature damage taken the longer you stand in them, but should the beam actually reach the boss, it will charge the energy very quickly, and 100 energy on the boss is an explosion on the group that will one-shot essentially everybody, except maybe the tank with full CDs or something like that, but at that point there's no point because everybody else is dead. So you want to make sure you rotate 3 to 4 members appropriately between the spires in order to split the damage and allow previous soakers to drop their stacks.
Yeah, so it stacks up, increasing damage taken from those pillars. So you want to make sure that you split it up and wait until the debuff is gone. Now, sometimes you will see a rogue, for example, taking 2 in a row because they can cloak off the debuff, or you can see a healer taking 2 in a row because they use self-defensives, which to be more efficient, especially when the healer doesn't have to split up the healing on multiple members. If it only has to heal 1 person or 2, it's just more efficient for the healer to do. But you know, on Fortified, without having anything like Grievous, it shouldn't really be a big deal. The only thing that can be really annoying is the quaking if it comes in when a member is soaking a pillar and it's already really low. But Jack doing a really good job here keeping everyone alive.
So really the moment of truth we were waiting for Team D was to actually aggro Galvast. That's what they were waiting to use their second Bloodlust on. And you know, it caught them up a fair bit, but they're still 50% behind Battle for Champion and an extra death on the board, which could come into play based on how close these two teams were together in the previous series that they had in the upper finals. Battle for Champion has now down Galvast. Unfortunately, the rogue gets nicked again by the little lightning game here. We'll have to see if they cross the bridge of lightning well. We did have 2 casualties overall in the West Cup last week. We'll have to see if there's any here for the East Cup. This is their last chance, so I hope they make me proud and somebody dies so that we can have a good chuckle, but it looks like they're going to get through it quite cleanly. Galvast to 25% for Team D, and Battle for Champion moving up and hoping to well skip the channeler as they distract it in one direction so that the balls of lightning don't go down the bridge. They kind of just shoot off to the side. Clever play by them.
Yeah, definitely like the Shroud coming in here, skipping this solo mob, which I've mentioned before that I don't like teams pulling the solo mob just because it takes so much time, and it's very inefficient because all these mobs that you see in this room don't give any enemy forces percentage. So killing any of these mobs doesn't really do anything for you. So you can't pull them on top of this channeler, which means you're just going to waste so much time dealing with this single mob. So now they're going to do this event, which there's those 2 eyes that you have to pick up, as we can see one of the rogues having it on the side, and you have to put them in the skeleton head of the snake at the end of the room. Now what you want to do is put them in at the same time, because once you put them in, they actually give enemy forces. Now if you pull Reaping after the first eye, you want to make sure that you put them in the same eye, because now we're going to see a Shadow Melt skip.
Unfortunately, one of the rogues on Team D actually did get hit on the lightning bridge, but managed to get back just in time before the channeler finished him off, and they did manage to successfully stealth by the channeler as well, getting into the same gauntlet, which Battle for Champion has already gone by and already kind of made up for their sins in the previous time they ran this dungeon. Did the proper skip into the final boss room, where Avatar of Sethraliss is being held by these 4 hexers. Now, you have to kill these 4 hexers before getting access to the final boss here.
I think they actually pulled 1 mob from the bridge accidentally when doing the skip. But anyway, they should be fine for now. The tank dropping pretty low, but they did recover. So they also have 2 battle rests left here, so they should be pretty fine as long as Jack survives to do it. But yeah, once you kill those hexers around the room, you can engage the last boss, which this boss works a little bit different to other bosses. You actually need to heal the avatar in the middle to get to new phases. You have to heal him to 70% after killing the first 4 hexers, and then you will get into second phase. And once you heal him to 100%, you will get into the last phase.
Team D rushing down top speed right now to the final boss room to catch up. At this point, they likely know they're slightly behind Battle for Champion, just having a peek on their second monitor or what have you at home. Getting quite low, though. The Prot Warrior on Battle for Champion manages to hang on with some support, healing from Jack, and one of the rogues getting low too. Plague Doctor in the middle here needs that chain lightning interrupted. We're gonna have a pretty bad quake timing right now. Manages to get 1 small heal on the rogue that was at 20% before that 20% max HP hits. Unfortunately, a bit of a sloppy skip here on the side of Team D, as we have Long and Ab both go down with nobody available to res them.
This is very scary for Team D here. Both of the teams actually not managing to do the skip properly. Battle for Champion, again, just not doing the Shadow Milk properly, getting that Plague Doctor and getting this other trash mob they did not supposed to get. Now, Team D actually completely having deaths and needing to release. Now, once they release, they actually have to deal with the Reaping again that they Shadow Melted earlier. So, just a disaster for Team D, while Battle for Champion only lost a little bit of time of killing the extra trash mob without the buff from the boss, but still, just sloppy play from both of those teams, which we're not supposed to see.
Yeah, no, a bit of sloppy play here. Now, this is actually a huge disaster for Team D. They didn't have anyone to res. The DK had died as well, so both people who could battle res were dead. There's no recovery. The rogues had to backtrack all the way back just to help them, because all of the Reaping that they skipped was still there. We know Reaping has a huge aggro radius, so they had to re-clear the 4th wave of Reaping that was supposed to be a skip earlier for them. Hopefully they have a Shroud available for the Channeler that they as well skipped, so we'll see here what they do with it. The Warrior just, debating on whether or not he wants to get cleanly through that gauntlet there. Manages to finally get through as Quaking chunks them down across this bridge. So things are looking quite grim here for Team D, as Avatar is being healed up to 70% for Battle for Champion, approaching their second phase, but Ab decides to take a little nip in the butt there from the lightning in Bear for Mog, as well as procced his cheat death. So this is just a huge problem as Quaking comes in and finishes off one of the rogues for Team D. Avatar now entering second phase for Battle for Champion right now, and it looks like they're, if they heal Avatar to 100%, it's over. There's no way they're dying with that buff, Nagura.
Definitely. Battle for Champion having a little bit of a failed skip here, but it didn't cost them as much as Team D. They're already working on their second phase of this last boss here. They have to kill those Hoodoo Hexers who are channeling the Avatar in the middle, and other than that, they have to handle the Plague Doctors, which need to be interrupted or just hard to see it, and they also have the Guardians that they have to deal with. One more thing, you see those toads running around, which usually have aggro on the healer because of healing aggro. Now, if they reach a person, they will explode and leave a disease behind, which not only does it do damage, but it will also reduce the healing done. So you want to make sure that you keep them away from the healer as best as you can.
Certainly don't want to be licking those poisonous toads, as the team does well to run into them. Moving out of the lightning here, guarding that last Hexer and spreading out for this quaking right now. Tree of Life has been blown out by Jack, the Resto Druid, on Battle for Champion here. Entering now the final push to get to 100% for Avatar of Sethraliss. Plague Doctor just sits on the side, but the DPS can handle that. The Orb is well hit over on the side for Battle for Champion, making sure that all of the heals that go up on Avatar are bolstered.
Yeah, very well done here by Battle for Champion on this boss fight, using that Tree of Life to heal the boss to 100%. Now, they are in the last phase. We just saw the buff being applied to everybody, so it doesn't really matter that Jack is completely out of mana, because no one really can take damage anymore with this damage reduction buff and the damage increase or haste increase buff. We saw Jack actually go back into this hallway, pull the rest of the trash down, the last 5% that they need, and now all they have to do is finish up the trash with the buff and slowly kill those last 4 Hoodoo Hexers, which the only thing you really want to make sure is that you kill the trash before you kill the Hoodoo Hexers, because once you kill them, the fight is going to be over and you're going to lose the buff immediately. So you want to make sure you kill the trash first and then you finish off those last Hoodoo Hexers, but it shouldn't be a problem for them here.
And slowly we're learning that the D in Team D stands for disaster, as they wipe again, trying to skip to the final boss. But right now, Avatar of Sethraliss, the final Hoodoo Hexer, about to go down for Battle for Champion. Not the cleanest of runs, but that's all they need as they pop the Bloodlust and finish the dungeon to take the series, the start of the series, excuse me, 1-0.
Very strong performance for Battle for Champion in Temple of Sethraliss here, and Team D just kind of falling apart on that last one there. Having some more critical errors with Shadow Meld is something we've seen multiple times in this tournament here, Sours.
Yeah, perhaps Nagora's the smartest one on the desk. She's the only one who predicted that these guys were going to win this dungeon, and she was right. Twitch chat was wrong. We were wrong.
But the dungeon of the series. The series isn't over yet.
It's true. The series isn't over yet, but it was still a pretty shocking prediction. Nobody expected it to be this dominant. They even went slower than their previous run in this dungeon, but the lack of single target damage from Team D wasn't looking very good. These bosses didn't end up going very well. You know, this boss is over, and they could have ran off, and he's just going to be RPing for a bit, and then he'll die anyway. But they just had such little single target damage, but that wasn't even why they ended up losing the dungeon. They just had a kind of less efficient route. They started to fall behind, and then everything sort of crumbled for them at the very end of the dungeon there.
And it even seemed like, even if Team D wasn't having that critical error that just made them miles away from Battle for Champion, it just seemed like they weren't really quite able to pull it through here. Next map we're going to have to go to is going to be Waycrest Manor, which should hopefully be a lot more suited to that Unholy Death Knight. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, Waycrest Manor between Battle for Champion and Team D. Battle for Champion up 1-0 against Team D here in the Mythic Dungeon International Eastern Grand Finals here. Next map up is going to be Waycrest Manor here. And Salute, Team D's down one. Are you going to be changing your prediction at all on this one?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely?
Absolutely not. I mean, these remaining 2 dungeons, you know, Tol Dagor, let's cross that bridge when we get there, but Tol Dagor certainly is going to be a canon fiesta and a bit comp independent, let's put it that way. Waycrest Manor certainly plays better to the strengths of the Unholy DK that we're seeing Team D quite committed to using throughout this series right now. We haven't seen either of these teams perform on Waycrest Manor so far today, so it's going to be interesting kind of what they bust out in terms of strategy. But I mean, I think this one is certainly more in favor of Team D, at least from an Unholy DK perspective.
Well, so far we saw a slight advantage between Team D having a little bit stronger time trials going into this, and based off what we've seen so far, Sours, it seems like they've always improved in those time trial runs pretty significantly. Yeah, so the time trial runs are, of course, the most practiced. They put in a lot of time, or they put in however much time they had available to them in the practice window to prepare for these dungeons, as well as the time spent executing these dungeons. So it's going to be up to Team D now to prove our predictions wrong, or some of our predictions wrong. Maybe they'll reverse sweep here, maybe they'll get 2-0'd. This dungeon can spiral out of control very quickly. These are some rowdy affixes here in Waycrest Manor. Starting up Game 2 in Waycrest Manor, Team D needs to show that D stands for determination as they're down 1-0 from Battle for Champion, and they need this one to stay alive.
Jack, stacks of determination are not exactly what this team wants right now based on the current live LFR model, but we do know, of course, as Sours mentioned, Team D actually was superior by 23 seconds in the time trial on this time trial dungeon here in Waycrest Manor. A really aggressive pull coming in here for Battle for Champion already as they drag the first 7 mobs up with Bloodlust. Team D opting to go directly to the Witch Triad.
Team D actually using their Bloodlust here and pulling the trash from the sides on top of the boss, so a very aggressive pull from Team D as well, shrouding past these first 3 mobs that Battle for Champion ended up pulling. So 2 different strats coming in from those 2 teams. Now on this first boss, the Triad, usually it's one of the most difficult fights here in this dungeon, but we have a 45 setting, so it should be alright for them to deal with this fight.
Right, you are, Nagura. Briar now down to about 50% as they start to recycle and enter phase 2. Of course, each sister needs to be brought to 50% sequentially before getting access to rekelling them again, dealing with the auras that we've mentioned a few times today, making sure you interrupt and chew through the mind controls, and dealing with their special abilities. Malady now up to bat for Team D. Battle for Champion now aggroing the Triad as well, as we see Tree of Life already busted out for Jack on the side of Battle for Champion.
Yeah, using that Tree of Life while Briar is enabled. Now this boss, or this sister, is actually one of the most dangerous ones because of her special ability, which is the Nettles, which puts a player very low with the initial damage and then puts kind of like a grievous effect on the player. If you don't heal a player above 90%, then the debuff will stay on it and does a lot of damage. So you want to make sure that you don't push Briar too early, because Selena, the sister that just died on Battle for Champion side, has a passive aura once she's active that reduces healing done by 50%.
Long popping the Swiftness potion right away and running straight into the hall, which is notoriously known to kind of gib a lot of tanks. Just really dangerous trash in there with those captains and a lot of the spells they cast, not to mention the Rune Weavers and the guards with their Shadow Cleave frontals. So really substantial tank damage pull here. Maw getting a bit of that cleave damage as well. A lot of attention is going to be needed paid here from Ab to try and support healing for long. Likely a lot of cooldowns coming out of Mob as those Shadow Abominations are killed through their enrage and stunned well with the shockwave from the Warrior Nagura. You can see just how much respect these tanks have for how dangerous this trash really is for them.
Definitely. We see Team D actually doing a little bit of backtracking as they pull the mobs that they shrouded earlier, which usually backtracking is not something you like to see, but just the fact that they got out the Bloodlust early for the boss, and you know, it wasn't too far for them to go back, and we can see the tank already kiting in the right direction once they're all raging at the very same time. As you can see, just trying to avoid as many melee attacks as possible from those guards, because they're just doing so much damage to the tank.
Yeah, I mean, they're having a lot of respect for that and only dipping in when he has his shield blocks and potentially another cooldowns available to his likelihood. Now, we are in a Grievous Affix as well, so every time they dip below that 90% threshold, it's going to add an increasing bleed damage over time, physical debuff to players, and only when you get healed above 90 does it go away. We're back at Raging, of course, as well. Any trash monster that dips below 30% HP gets 100% increased damage done. Long dipping quite low there for Team D as they get a pretty substantial pull. Now, it's important to try and get these mobs in some of the fire here in the courtyard as they do take damage from it.
That is a very big pull coming from Team D here, pretty much pulling the entire courtyard except the mini boss here, on top of also triggering the Reaping Wave. So pretty substantial pull coming in, as we can see. All the DPS is doing so much AoE damage here. They are pulling ahead of trash percentage here on Team D side, while Battle for Champion is taking it a little bit slower in this courtyard.
Yeah, getting a bit out of hand though. We had Long get a defensive Typhoon there from Ab as he started to kind of kite away, because not only was Grievous impossible to get out of for Ab, but he just did not have enough dispels going around for the debuffs from these Risen Souls. So the 2 damage over time components together on Long were just hitting so hard as he still struggles and gets chunked for 50% HP at a time with the 2 stack of Grievous and 25 stacks from the Risen Soul. Finally getting that Dispel, pops the Swiftness potion and starts running into Rawl's Wing of the Manor to pull a lot of these Devouring Maggot packs. Now, you have to make sure you interrupt the Infest on these mobs, otherwise they will burrow inside of a player, and 10 seconds later 2 more will spawn.
Yeah, this is also a pretty big pull coming in from Team D again, which, you know, you have to be very careful with these maggot packs, as we can see the whole group just dropping so low on Team D's side, because those maggots are applying applying a spit debuff to random targets. It can also be 4 or 5 debuffs on the same player. Now, on top of having Fortified, plus Raging, plus Grievous, those kind of pulls are very dangerous, as we can see the players just dropping so low.
Yeah, a lot of damage coming out. Battle for Champion, of course, right on their heels as they opt to do trash just a bit differently. They rush in and pull Matron Brindle along with the Soulbound Goliath, something that I don't think we've seen this weekend or last weekend. So really bold pull coming in here from them. Brindle, of course, can be damaged by the fire on the ground, but you can't move her in there now because the Soulbound Goliath is here, and we know that if you go in the fire, he will reset his stacks of damage, but also do a substantial amount of AoE damage onto the group. So pretty bold pull here. A lot of tank incoming damage as well, so they have to make sure to kill Matron before it gets too out of hand for the Prot Warrior.
I do believe Team D actually pulled the mini bus and the reaping on top of the bus. So crazy pulls coming out of both of those teams. Just so many mobs, you can barely see them on Team D side. Of course, Unholy DK just doing an insane amount of AoE damage to deal with all of the mobs coming in here. But yeah, crazy pulls coming in from both of those teams. Now Goliath is usually not very dangerous because at the start when he pulled a bus, he has no stacks at all, but he will stack up a buff on himself, increasing his damage done. So as long as you get rid of the mini boss at some point before the stacks are too high, they should be alright.
There's just so much damage coming in on the Prot Warrior on Soulbound on a Battle for Champions side. Dipped to 4% health there because of the Enrage as well, with the Thorn Barrage coming out of the Matron, and of course the increased damage stacks from the Soulbound Goliath here. So Team D finally dealing with Brindle as well in a much cleaner and safer manner than did Battle for Champion. But Nagura, not only did Team D say, hey, we see you Battle for Champion, we're going to one-up you with Matron Brindle and the Reaping Pack, but they also pulled extra Thorn Shaper trash on top of it, and the DK just went to town on that pull, destroying everything around it, and they're only now 20 or about 30% behind Battle for Champion with a 9% trash lead as well.
Yeah, they will have to make sure that they catch up on this trash with this DK, because they're definitely going to have less single target damage, as we see Goliath just going down much faster in Battle for Champion side. So this is exactly what Team D needs to do, which we have seen them do in the past as well, except in this last temple, which was very uncharacteristic for them. But you know, for all the other dungeons, they have pulled off these strats for the DK very well, and we see them do it here in Waycrest as well. Soulbound
Goliath now falling for Battle for Champion, as immediately they did well to position him just within charge range of, or intervene, excuse me, intercept range of the pack in the corner, the 2 Thorn Shapers, and of course the Thorn Guard for Battle for Champion, just wanting to proc that extra 3% so they can get their 40% second Reaping Wave and combine it with likely some of the trash in the Rawl Hall. Soulbound Goliath now at 14% for Team D as they start to as well position it near the exit to the courtyard so they can save some travel time.
Yeah, so one more thing we haven't really mentioned yet is the thorns that the boss casts. Now, the thorns will target a random member, which is not a tank, will stun them until you damage the thorns out of the player. Now, as a healer, or as a Rested Druid at least, you can pre-shapeshift and will be immune to the thorns, so that's usually what we see the Rested Druids doing here. But yeah, both of those teams killed Goliath. Now they're on to the next trash as we see Battle for Champions dealing with their second Reaping Wave.
So we see a big pull here for Battle for Champions along with a Reaping, LOSing it into the corner right now. But Team D follows suit with a pretty substantial trash pull yet again. No trash, no Reaping to combine into this one too. But these mobs do a lot of damage right now. Marksmen and the Peasants as well, especially once they enrage, is something to watch out for. And especially the damage that splashes onto the group, as you mentioned, with the spit from the Maggots as well. Long, you can see, is already trying to safely kite down the hall as those enraged mobs deal a tremendous amount of melee damage to them. Likely have run out of some shield block charges. Charges back in once it's safe, just to help finish off with some of that immense Prot Warrior damage. We're seeing a stealth come in here for Battle for Champion. There is a purple diamond world marker in the corner of this hallway, and it looks like they're going to pull everything together.
Okay, that's a pretty big pull coming in for Battle for Champions here. So they shrouded the tank through so he could start pulling from the back forward so he can drag all these mobs back. We see a purple marker coming down. This is probably where the CC is going to come in, like the Ring of Peace and the stance from the warrior. As we see them all drop low into Raging here, and this is going to be a lot of damage on the group coming through as those maggots spawn. Now, one thing to mention though is, as we see the tank drop really low, is those spit casts can be interrupted with stuns. So what you want to do, especially on Raging, is you want to save your stuns for when either they're casting a spit or when they're going into Raging, and just use your stun abilities and interrupt abilities there to make sure that you don't get this extra damage in.
Team D's actually moved into kind kind of that lodging living room essentially area of the manor, and they've pulled a lot of those huntsman packs that typically the only time we've seen them pulled is in, at least throughout the tournament so far these weeks, is teams coming back up after killing the 5th boss Gorak tool and then pulling these with either a bloodlust or what have you. But either way, they're trying to kill them off first. They're going to proc their 60% reaping wave. Curious to see what Team D does with that in just a moment here, and it looks like they're all rushing back into the hallway with this reaping, and they're actually just going to pull Rawl along with the reaping and all of the trash in his room. Here comes the big bloodlust as well. A lot of damage going to be coming in on the prot, where need to make sure you interrupt those dinner bells. Huge amounts, 1 million DPS for the unholy DK. Absolutely annihilates all of the trash and the reaping that's present in the room, destroying everything before it even becomes a threat for the prot warrior. And they stabilize with Rawl already at 66% right now. Bloodlust isn't even done. 10 seconds left on Bloodlust. Battle for champion, not to be outdone too much, but certainly a much more modest pull, as they only pulled half of the trash in Rawl's room and will now position themselves to grab the rest of the trash and aggro Rawl with it. But that was crazy.
There was an insane pull coming out of Team D. Just 1 million DPS coming out of this unholy DK, just showing that strength of doing those huge pulls and just annihilating them at the very start with those big cooldowns coming in. But yeah, we see both of those teams engaging Rawl now. Rawl is a stationary boss and doesn't really have any scary mechanics as long as you avoid them. We see the tenderize here, which either is middle, left, or right side of the room. Now, you need to make sure that you dodge that ability, because the boss also gets buffed sometimes from those servants if they reach the boss. Usually the buff doesn't really matter on the boss, because, as I said, all those abilities are avoidable and the tank damage is not too bad.
Yeah, I'm still speechless. But crazy massive damage coming in from Team D. Rawl now down to 8%. Of course, he is stationary, as Nagura mentioned, on the side of the room. Tank needs to make sure to stay well within range of him. Otherwise, he will melee one of the other closest members of the party, or just start to pulse damage onto the group. Runeweaver from the kitchen has already been pulled on top of the pack too. We can see her at half health as they bring her to the kitchen to finish her off. Raging does come up. No Dispel, as the rest of Druid is, I believe, gone off to grab some trash from downstairs in the basement. We'll have to see that in a moment. So the tank will need to deal with that 100% increased damage from the Raging.
Yeah, we see them, Team D side, we see them proccing that Reaping Wave here. I'm not sure if they will Shadow Melt it or if they're just going to go down and pull the Reaping on top of something else. But so we see the Shadow Melt coming through, and now the Shroud to probably this second to last boss room area.
I mean, Rawl now at 15%. I was just distracted here. Team D perfectly at 83%, stealthing through the rest of the trash in the basement, past Matron Alma and all the kind of residual trash up there. They'll do probably a full room pull here. I wouldn't doubt it, based on what we've seen. Full room pull here, right in front of Lord and Lady Waycrest. And the boss, excuse me. Lord Waycrest has been pulled on top of all the trash in this room. Now, as much damage as the Unholy DK is going to provide here, they do need to be careful, not only for the tank damage with Raging, but also, Nagura, those candles that are dropped by some of the casters here, the Soul Charmers, will decrease damage taken by 50% for anything standing in it. So they do well to move right away out of that kind of candle flurry on the ground, if you will, all those runes on the ground, to make sure that the boss is well DPS. Now, every time the Lord hits 30% health, she, Lady Waycrest, will start summoning and siphoning some of her health into Lord Waycrest, losing 30% of her own health.
I just want to point out just how dangerous those pulls are coming in from Team D, because I've mentioned before that those affixes are very, very dangerous for this dungeon. In Waycrest, if you have Fortified, you have Raging, and you have Grievous, then all those like huge pulls that are coming through by Team D are just so dangerous. If anything goes wrong, any small mistake, it will just cause a full group wipe. So very impressive pulls here by Team D. I don't think we've seen anything like this from the Western region yet. So this is crazy, crazy pulls coming out of Team D here.
Really,
impressive.
really aggressive as Lady Waycrest joins Lord Waycrest now for Phase 2 for Team D. Now when she gets to 10%, she will join the cast. Now she doesn't really do anything, some moderate tank damage here, just a cast that needs to be interrupted in a 2 melee rotation about every 8 seconds or so. She will, every 10 seconds or so, she will cast that, no problem for them. And they're looking to go for a more DPS efficient strategy where they will actually cleave both of this couple down together to make sure that they die at the same time. Now, Lord Waycrest doing a fair bit of damage at this point, does have 3 stacks of 5% increased damage, but should be no problem really for the warrior tank here, especially especially because you can spell reflect that frontal. Not to be outdone though, and right on their heels, Battle for Champion, not far behind, but Battle for Champion, Nigger, if I noticed correctly, actually came down here with 80% on the trash, meaning they're going to need to do that whole kill Gorak tool and run upstairs to kill something else.
Yeah, we've seen this before, that some teams will just kill the last boss and then backtrack and kill some trash at the start of the dungeon. Now this usually, at least in my opinion, costs you a lot of time. Now, the best time that we have seen in the Western region was actually Method AU, and they were doing the backtracking. So I'm still not completely sure which one is better to do. Usually backtracking is not good, but if the fastest time is coming from a team that did the backtracking, so it might just be better. But we see Team D downing the boss and moving on to these horrors, which are pretty dangerous, especially when they're raging. That's why we see the Vortex coming in here at the very end.
The Unholy Death Knights 1 million plus DPS says no backtracking allowed. I want to kill everything in this room. They go downstairs to Gorak Tool, Shadow Meld the last wave of Reaping, and get started on Gorak Tool, while Lloyd Waycrest and Lady Waycrest just now being down by Battle for Champion, who still needs to deal with the horrors that we just saw and are very dangerous in that hallway. Gorak Tool now down to 90%. Very important here that all of the slavers that spawn are interrupted properly, whether it's a grip, a stun, a punt, disorient, whatever it may be, else they will stun a player. And after that, of course, once they're dead, Nagura, the healer usually needs to make sure that they use the torch on the corpse and burn it before Gorak Tool reaches 100 energy, else he will resurrect them and you'll get overrun.
Yeah, that's why we see the healer just walking in the back there, because they can spawn randomly around the room, those torches, so the healer usually makes sure that he picks them up and burns those slavers before they get resurrected. Now, other than that, this boss really doesn't do anything very dangerous. Those slavers do jump around sometimes too and do splash AoE damage, but it's not that scary, so that's why we see them all being stacked up. They don't really care that it splashes on the whole group, because App can definitely heal with this damage.
Yeah, no problem. There's a couple of 4 stacks of Grievous running around, but nothing that they can't handle. Another slaver spawns. They do have a double slaver right now, but Shockwave does dual interrupt their channels right there.
Yeah, so in the end, it's not even, it's, you know, just Team D having those big pulls, just pulling so far ahead. In the end, Battle for Champions still needs this 4% trash, so even if they would kill a boss faster, which they don't, then they would still need to backtrack. So Team D just showing the DK strategies coming at you with these insane pulls and a very, very good time in Waycrest.
I mean, this is just not even close. This is a dominant performance by Team D, and it looks like Team Team D has just done a substantial job and shown why they were the #1 in the time trials for this dungeon by 23 seconds. I mean, just like incredible. Jack?
Absolutely incredible there, Suit. Very good, very wordsy. There we go. Team D, Team Death Knight here has just torn through that Waycrest Manor. Some very impressive pulls and the cleanliness with which they did it, those Sours. But despite the raging, despite the Grievous, they really were able to pull that together on every single pull.
Oh, yeah, they had 1 shot to do this dungeon live. They had 5 shots to do it in time trials. And when they did it live here on broadcast, they did it 2 full minutes faster than their best time trial attempt. That's remarkable.
Yeah, and the growth. Every single time we're seeing that growth out of this team.
Yeah, so this dungeon was looking pretty close all the way up until the 3rd boss, really, where teams were just kind of trading bosses. Everything was looking pretty good. And Team D was just kind of started doing some crazy pulls with bosses where they did Soulbound Goliath. They pulled Reaping as well as the mini-boss into the boss, whereas Battle for Champion only was doing the mini-boss with the boss. And then on Raw, they just kind of took the lead and really took a dominant lead there.
Yeah, and having to look at how they set up that pull, Sours. Are we ready to start looking at the 1 million DPS here?
It's a beautiful pull. We normally like to look at teams kind of falling apart here, but we're going to look at a team doing a beautiful thing here. Loon pops his Lightfoot potion there, gets 150% increased movement speed, and they gather everything. His health dropped so low there, but he's got his defensives available, got everything, and then this Death Knight just goes to town. 1 million DPS in Battle for Azeroth is insane. He does 13 million damage in a couple of seconds. He kills all of the trash, all of the Reaping, everything. He just kills it all. Like Death Knight. It's ridiculous.
Nothing was able to stop him. But I guess it's important to know that last week we did have the Western region with it. They weren't quite close to that kind of damage, but they did have to deal with bursting and necrotic to it. You try to be able to pull that in with those kind of affixes, you're going to get burned pretty quickly there, right?
I think if you pull that with bursting, you're just dead instantly.
Yep, we are tying up this series here 1-1. The third game of the series is going to be on that Tol Dagor here. We're going to have to see if there's going to be any Death Knight advantage when cannons have been such a huge component of that. Don't go anywhere, guys. Game 3 coming up right after this break. Team D has tied it up 1-1 here in the grand finals for the Mythic Dungeon International here. The Eastern region is coming down to 1 game remaining here. I'm Jack, and joining me on the desk for this final game is Sloot, Nagura, and Sours here. And guys, Tol Dagor, I don't think really offers much crazy advantage for one team or over another here, Sours.
Yeah, Death Knight doesn't really do a lot here because the cannons do everything.
Leaning on just those cannons, I think it's just going to be about that execution. We've seen wipes all the time in Salute over Jez Howler, over some of the execution of getting all the mobs in together here. Just the simple mistakes.
Yeah, the only detriment that will come to any team here is really just going to be this tyrannical affix. That's all it is. Any of the bosses can wipe them, especially the last boss. Some poor positioning, some unfortunate doubles. We'll have to see exactly how it turns out. But I think for me, the most exciting thing about this dungeon is we're just one step closer to proving Nagura wrong.
Oh, you think so? In many ways,
you better think so too. That's what you said.
To be fair, you're saying that the trash doesn't really matter in this dungeon, right? But the bosses matter. The bosses are tyrannical. They have a lot of HP. So I think that Battle for Champ actually is going to have the advantage just for a single target damage, just killing them faster. So as long as they have the same strategy, I do believe the single target damage from Battle for Champion is going to prevail.
Well,
but they lost in time trial.
They did.
Keep in mind that Sloot is driving you home tonight, Nagura, so we will see who will take this grand final here. Final dungeon of the night on Tol Dagor here, and we do just need one more second here for this. So before Sloot jumps into how right he's going to be onto this.
Why is this all about me? You voted in favor of Team D as well. Now, don't get me wrong. I certainly don't disagree with the analysis that there's a superior single target component in favor of Battle for Champion. But I mean, it just, things can go very wrong in this dungeon very quickly.
Definitely. We've seen a lot of mistakes coming in also in the Western region here. Now, I do believe, though, that the affixes in the Eastern region are easier. We just don't have this Sanguine, which is very dangerous. What happened?
I mean, well, both teams are pulling an immense amount of trash on top of the boss. Speaking of unholy DK, the 600k damage coming in on top of the Sand Queen right now. Now, we saw a lot of teams prior to this actually kind of just snake through the trash and ignore everything and make most of their percentage upstairs, but both teams actually really aggressive pull here on top of the Sand Queen, Nagura.
Interesting to see, because as we mentioned before, most of the trash can be killed with cannons and it's just so much more efficient. So all the teams that we have seen before in Tol Dagor, we're trying to avoid pulling any sort of trash because you can do it later with the cannon. So why pull trash earlier when you can just avoid the trash completely and do it later? We see one death actually coming in by Team D here.
And it was actually the DK who had to use the battle res on. Back up they come. Of course, a lot of dot damage spreading around from the parasites, unfortunately, for Team D. So definitely straining Ab there as Battle for Champions still at 13% trash, but 55% on the boss for both of the teams and 14% for Team D. I was actually kind of having an idea that maybe Team D was trying to proc their first reaping with the Sand Queen, but it looks like they just kind of stopped pulling any residual trash here, stopped at that 14% mark, and both teams now neck and neck in the high 40s on Sand Queen.
Yeah, so Sand Queen does do some mechanics that are very dangerous, so yeah, gotta watch out with these sand traps spawning, as we can see right now. They do spawn close to players, so you want to make sure that you stack up, because once those sand traps spawn, you see those drones spawning out of them, which are pretty much the same as the trash before this boss. They will apply debuffs to whoever has aggro, so you want to make sure that the tank can pick them up immediately. That's why you spawn them very close.
Yeah, and they do add a nature stacking dot to them, but importantly as well, for the sake of this boss, is every parasite or drone that dies near the Sand Queen actually buffs her damage, so enrages her by 5% per stack. Now, it does fall off naturally, but the Druid can also soothe it off, so just a bit of extra damage on the tank, but that enrage stack can actually spill over into the upheaval when she does burrow every 40-45 seconds or so. That upheaval is pure nature damage, so can deal a substantial amount of damage, even especially in a tyrannical setting, one-shot potential should she have any of those stacks, Nagura.
Yeah, definitely. So when the upheaval happens, there's a bunch of mechanics to avoid the upheaval damage. You can either blink or grapple or something like that, as long as you do it in the right moment. You can also use the Shadow Meld, which all of the teams so far have been Alliance. They do have their Shadow Meld ready to avoid the ability if they have to, as we see the Sand Queen dying for both both of those teams.
You know, a single target advantage or not for Battle for Champion, Team D actually finished the boss off first, but at the cost of a death and the battle res use for them as they spread out well in the source here for that quaking, making sure that none of that clips the players. Of course, for those at home, right now quaking does proc every 20 seconds or so and will damage all players for 20% of max health with that small brown circle radius around them. But of course, you can't actually clip other players with it, so you have to make sure to spread out well. And we are also in this teaming environment, Nagura.
Yeah. We see the Quaking, so we see the Windwalker actually going down for Battle for Champion here. He did have a little bit of aggro, and he also had the Quaking coming in at a very, very bad timing, but they managed to battle rest and back up and Shadow Melt. So that's what they were doing here. Oh no, the Windwalker going down again. So I do believe they wanted to skip this trash here by melting, but this is a disaster for Battle for Champion. They just failed their Shadow Melts. Still had aggro from the mobs that they pulled beforehand. Just pretty much having a complete wipe here. The only one surviving is the tank, but he of course does not have a rest or anything, so the rest of the team needs to come back somehow. Yeah,
this is an absolute disaster for Battle for Champion. It seems like they want to prove you wrong. Team D moving upstairs, doing well to spread out. They're already on Jess Howler's floor right now, so this is kind of a multi-floor dungeon right now. The second boss resides just in the top screen there. You can see Jess Howler. A lot of damage coming in here from the various casters. The Sea Speakers specifically do a ton of damage, nature damage with their Salt Blast on the tank. Rather salty mobs there. Now, you also have to watch out, more importantly, their Watery Dome. Watery Dome, if the cast gets off, will kind of shroud all enemies around them with an Absorb Shell, which is just a ton of damage that they need to get through. And these teams don't really have offensive dispels. They don't have Blood Elves because they're running Alliance, no Priests, no Shaman, so no Demon Hunters either for Consume Magic. So there's a lot of extra health that they need to chew through should one of those get off.
It's a disaster on Battle for Champions side. They have those double thugs in front of this door, which do have stealth detection. So either the rogues needs to go past. Okay, so we actually see the tank dying now because they need the tank to pull them away. Because I assume both of the rogues just do not have their Vanish ready, do not have their Shadow Meld ready, so they can't do the skip without the tank. They need to have him die, release, come back, and do the skip one more time. This is just costing him so much time here.
Yeah, the tank's finally running up now. You do snapshot the boss location after you kill Sand Queen, so Warrior opted to finally die. Gonna pull them to the side, and they're gonna run up the stairs with them right now, all as a happy group. Team D doing a huge pull on top of Jess Howlis right now with their 20% reaping and any other mobs, including some of the casters and arsonists that were present there, just grouping everything together and getting as much damage in as possible. Surprisingly, the Unholy DK not skyrocketing on the meters this time. I'm not sure what happened there. Perhaps CDs were not ready or just slow to the party. Nonetheless, they do manage to annihilate everything at 37% trash and interrupt the Howling Fear for Jess Howlis at 80%. We do know Nagura that, of course, at 70%, we will have the transition, but even more disaster on the side of Battle for Champion as the Windwalker is down again.
Yeah, at this point, their whole route is just not going to work out anymore. They had to kill the Parasites at the start, and just having another death, just catastrophic skip failure from Battle for Champions, as we see Jess Howlis going to the intermission phase here on Team D's side. Now, we've seen a team before also pull a Reaping on top of Howlis, but they actually had their tank dying during this smoke bomb phase, during the 70% push, because they had Reaping alive still. But we see Team D just dealing with it a lot better, killing all the Reaping before the boss transitions, and now he's going to go around, open all of those cages on the way, and then we also see Bobby coming out.
So now there needs to be a lot of well-coordinated interrupts, and interesting to see the Arsonist here in the doorway that they kept CC'd, crowd controlled the entire time. They pull it on top of Jess Howlis right now for the second phase, looking to kill it and proc their 40% reaping on top of the boss here. So hopefully they can pull that off. Need to well-coordinate interrupts for Howling Fear, not only from Jess Howlis now, but Bobby Howlis as well. So they need to line of sight here for the daggers, as with the first phase. Bobby will run off momentarily and cast his Howling Fear, which can also be line of sighted here in the corner as long as they're sitting there. The Arsonist about to go down, and the 40% reaping has procced. They'll group it up right on top of Jess Howlis and once again benefit from the presence of that Unholy DK.
I have to say I do disagree with their strategy here on Team D's side, even if they're, getting the benefit from having extra mobs here, but they don't need all of these trash. They can just do it with the cannons later. They only need to have approximately 22%. Oh, and we see actually DK going down here to the flashing daggers, I believe. So they don't have a battle rest ready. They have to finish off the boss without this DK, as the rogue also drops very, very low because Bobby was doing this stun on him as he dies with the Quaking coming out, and the healer actually being completely out of mana. So now they have to finish off this boss, which probably won't happen because they're not going to have enough interrupts. They only have 2 interrupts here, and Bobby and both Howlers need to be interrupted with the fear and with the jump stun. So if they actually manage to finish off this boss, I'm going to be very surprised.
I think they will be able to, because you can line of sight all of the Howling Fear, so they'll be able to finish it off, but certainly not in a very kind of nice manner here as they lose 2 of them. We did have a flashing dagger hit on the Unholy DK, so just really poor sloppy play there, and the Rogue did get trapped into the vicious mauling from Bobby, which can be interrupted, but nobody interrupted because they probably didn't have it available, and then got slowly killed. Finally, both mobs died at the same time, and the tank is stunned right now. Unfortunately goes down, but just Hallis dies at the same time. A breath of relief and wiping the sweat off their forehead. Team D now able to res here at the checkpoint that they've set up for themselves, with the second boss finally being downed, and a little breath of relief and sign of life for Battle for Champion in this regard.
Definitely. They have a window open. Of course, they didn't have a full team wipe here, which would have been a disaster for Team D2. But yeah, again, I just want to mention that I do think their strategy here is just not very good, because we've seen so many other teams just doing their 22% trash, going up to the cannon part and just dealing with all the reaping waves there, dealing with all the trash. And within like 3 minutes, you can do 80% worth of trash with those cannons. So I don't like the strategy of just doing more trash than you're supposed to, which also cost them a couple of deaths here. But Team D still ahead, of course, not causing them to have a full team wipe, so they're still in the driver's seat here.
I do agree with you. It is certainly inefficient. I think they're just trying to play to the best efficiency they can because of the DK in the group, but it's still the net efficiency of losing the immense damage from the cannons, which we're seeing right now on the side of Team D, is just perhaps not worth it, not to mention the mechanical riskiness of their play that actually almost cost them a full team wipe because of that. Speaking of full team wipe, we do have the tank go down on Battle for Champion over on the left side. There is I don't want to say no way that they're not going to clean up the rest of this, but the problem is watery domes are casting left and right. Cheat Death is proc for one of the rogues. He's getting chunked as he has aggro on a lot of the mobs without the tank being alive. This quaking should finish that rogue off. They're going to move over to the Windwalker. Finally, the battle rest comes up. The moment it comes off of cooldown, but too little too late as Jack gets killed too. The Pro Warrior trying to do what he can along with the rogue to finish off the last of it, but they don't have the interrupts to chew through the absorb from the watery dome, and that's going to be all she wrote for Battle for Champion, as they have another full team wipe, and Team D already establishing themselves up above just before the 4th reaping wave at 78% with the cannon.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that both of those teams having problems in Tol Dagor, which is, you know, usually one of the easier dungeons on live service just because of this cannon part. Now that they're struggling so much, even though they had so many like clean dungeons previously in this tournament, it's a shame to see, especially because this is the grand final and it's the very last dungeon, so it's about the prize money here. But we see Team D on 92% trash. They just made up so much trash with this cannon part here, and they're on their way to the second to the last boss.
Free dungeon, by the way. Forehead for the teams. I mean, but truthfully speaking, everyone expected this kind of just to be, you know, a race to who can get to the cannon first, and after that it's just, you know, a crazy quick dungeon. But a lot of struggles from both teams coming up here is finally we do aggro the 3rd boss, Knight Captain Valyri here. Not too difficult of a boss as well, but it all depends on the proper management of the barrels around the room. She will have various abilities that ignite those barrels, which have a huge area of denial with a substantial amount of damage. So you can see the strat here that a lot of teams pick up the barrels, drag them to the corner of the rooms, and make sure that you move out of the way of her cinder flames to make to not get hit, but also have space for the DPS, the melee in this case especially, to get access to this frequently casting boss.
Yeah, we see those barrels spawn again around her. Now we're usually going to see the healer and the tank, if needed, picking up the barrels, just dragging them in the corners, as we can see it right now happening. Now one strategy is to just wait for the cinder flame. That's why they are tanking it in the middle and just looking in which direction she casts the cinder flame, which is one of the abilities that will ignite those barrels, and then just pretty much drag only the barrels that are in the cinder flame, just you know, having less or needing less time to move around those barrels, as we can see that happening right now.
Valyri down to 55% right now. There's a couple barrels just barely on the edge of that, wanting to make sure you spread here in the close spaces. Now, in terms of efficiency, and really important for the tank here to pre-move the boss to what will be their safe corner for the next round of barrels, just because we mentioned she casts so frequently between Cinder Flame and debuff application in terms of damage over time on everybody else, and she also just kind of sits there hanging out for fun between casts. So if the barrels start to explode in the middle of the room here and she's mid-cast sequence, the melee just kind of have to sit there and watch her until she gets in the corner. So doing well here for Team D, finally to move her to the corner. 33% on Valeri, and Battle for Champion doing what they can to catch up, but I mean, they're just back to the second boss's trash right now, only starting to rework on it.
Yeah, definitely super far behind here for Battle for Champions, but Team D about to kill Valeri here. Not a big problem for them. They're also saving their Bloodlust for the last boss. As it is the most difficult boss fight here on a tyrannical setting, you can get a little bit unlucky with RNG, with the AoE damage on their group, as we're going to see later. But yeah, they only have 8% trash left, which I assume they're going to do after the boss fight.
So we're seeing Bloodlust come up here from Battle for Champion along with the 40% Reaping Wave on top of Jess Howlis as well at 87% in the first phase. A similar pull to what we saw Team D do about 4 hours ago. Knight Captain Valeri here just now in the corner, getting finished off sub 5%, 3%, 2%, and she's going to fall over. 8% trash remaining for Team D as they move over to the final cannon and trash, likely wanting to skip a lot of this so that they can backtrack after, and deal with the final Reaping Wave. If there's any boss in this dungeon, Nagura, that can possibly cause them to wipe several times in order for Battle for Champion to catch up, it is, of course, this final boss. But, I mean, truthfully speaking, they do need, like, 2 full team wipes for them to fall behind.
Yeah, I think even if they wipe one time, even late into the boss fight, I think they can still do it because, you know, they're just so far ahead at this point. And we see another wipe coming in by Battle for Champion. They're just struggling so much at this point. But now let's talk about this last boss here, Korgus, which is a very difficult fight. Now, one of the base mechanics is this bar that fills up. You can see it underneath each player. If the bar fills up all the way to full, which is triggered by movement, then you will be stunned. So you want to make sure that doesn't happen.
And you get stunned for 8 seconds as well in a fight where positioning and slight mobility is very, very important for things like the Deadeye shot that will debuff a player for about 90 seconds. You have to rotate that hit between at least three players in the group, else you will suffer 500% stacking increased damage from subsequent hits. The tank has a very tough job here of sitting still and making sure that you avoid the cross ignition, but it is truthfully very hard to see in that corner. And you start to kind of play musical chairs here where you get danced around based on the explosive bursts having a full melee comp, and you can see just how much damage those do as Mog starts to dip low and make Ab's life just quite tough right now with the amount of damage that is going out.
Yeah, the explosive bursts are those red circles that you can see going around 3 players whenever it's getting cast. Now, after a couple of seconds, it will explode and it will it will do a lot of initial damage and then also leave a debuff behind that does ticking damage. Now, you can get unlucky and get doubles, as you call them, which whenever he casts a Deadeye, if he casts the explosive burst after the Deadeye, then you will get a double debuff pretty much. The debuff itself does not stack, but because the rounds come so close to one another, the healer is going to have a hard time healing the people up again so they don't die to the initial damage of the next round.
So doing well here to position and spreading kind of a nice little pentagon right between them. That we do get the double that Nagura was talking about, as this team's kind of scurry to get in a safe position from that AoE on the boss. You want to make sure you're not within those dark zones, as you'll take a substantial amount of damage. But it kind of didn't play very well with quaking at the same time. So a bit of damage spike. Nothing Ab can't handle, though. Jess Howlis now finally re-engaged for Battle for Champion. And here comes another round of explosive burst. Overseer Korgus now 25% health as one of the rogues dips quite low, and Ab is frantically trying to get him back to health.
Yeah, thankfully it was only a single here at this point, and those explosive bursts actually favor range, but because there's only one range, it's going to be Ab who takes every single explosive burst, but the rest of the group will rotate an explosive burst. So even if you get a double, you can be lucky and only have a double on the healer, while the other explosive rounds just rotate from 2 players to other 2 players, so you can get a little bit lucky there because you just run with this full melee line.
Important to note that part of the positioning here is not only so that members have something behind them that they could get punted into during those explosive bursts and not incur too much movement damage.
I think he's gonna die.
No, don't say that, Nagura. Don't say that.
So
the only person that's gonna die here is Overseer Korgus at 3% as Ab struggles to heal the rest of the group. But this positioning also important to avoid the cannons on the side. Speaking of cannons, the group has finished off Korgus without any sweat at all. Of course, even though they're all sub 12%, and they will be run over to the final cannon corner here to clean up the remaining 8% worth of trash.
Yeah, so this 8% is going to die very quickly with the cannon. As we can see, one one of the rogues is jumping in there, finishing off the last trash. As long as he doesn't kill his own group here with the cannon, they should be very easily just winning this last round here of the grand final. Well, Battle for Champion still on Howless, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you want to get that Tricks of the Trade on top of them, but Team D with a dominant performance here, albeit sloppy. Battle for Champ just cannot handle Team D, and they come out indeed, as predicted by Sours and several of us, except for Nagura, with the reverse sweep to take MDI East Cup 1 and crown themselves as champion.
Team D has gotten their revenge. They have taken down Battle for Champion here, as well as Nagura's hopes and dreams to be a prophet. Team D, an incredible performance here. We'll let Sloot glow a little bit as we're going into it. An incredible performance here, taking the MDI Eastern Regions Championship the first weekend that we have. The next weekend following is going to be for the Western region. But let's take a look at the bracket here, how Team D got to this point here. They did an incredible job moving to through the second seed. They actually ended up getting, probably a cleaner run than Battle for Champion did, where Battle for Champion had a little bit of a shakier start in some of their dungeons, though they were 2-0ing some teams, but Team D was the essence of consistency going through there, only dropping down to that lower bracket from Battle for Champion and then taking them down in that grand finals here. So very strong performance that they had to be able to take them down. Now we're finally able to see, once again, we've had first and second seeds going into the grand finals back-to-back weeks here, Sours. Very strong performances.
Yeah, but this time it was the second seed that won those grand finals as opposed to the first seed. Now, if Team D hadn't had such a terrible Shrine of the Storm in their time trials, they probably would have been the first seed. So this that's why this was so close, and that's why I was so confident that Team D would win it, which they ended up doing. Sorry, Nagura.
To be fair, I mean, it was a very good observation that because the bosses were going to be much more of a focus point there, when you're not having the Unholy DK taking care of it. Although I think it was pretty surprising for both of you when we had the very first pull from the game was everything into that boss there to be able to start blowing it up there, Sloot.
Yeah, and especially without, I was a bit shocked to see it, and then I was like, Unholy DK makes sense that they want to pull this all together, as we saw most teams kind of snake in with a Shroud and just go straight for the Sand Queen, but both teams doing it, I guess they had an ulterior motive and plan of proccing Reaping at certain points in the dungeon. It actually looked, at least up to the point that we saw for Battle for Champion, they were looking to do the same kind of reaping patterns, 40% reaping into just Howless, which is, I totally agree with Nagura, especially for a team that doesn't have an Unholy DK, kind of weird.
Yeah.
And they really pay the price for it too, incurring those 2 deaths and almost having the entire wipe there, Nagura. I mean, it was a spot-on call on that one.
Yeah, I'm really not sure why they did it. Now, I mean, just the DK getting the single target extra damage, because not only do they do the AoE damage, but they also get a strength buff because of Faster Might, right? So maybe just because this extra single target damage, they decided to do it. I mean, it worked out in the end. Of course, they probably expected Battle for Champion to just do so badly.
It worked out in the end for them, indeed. And taking a look at where all these teams stand, the victory that Team D has had, and it's going to be resulting in a huge pool of points here going into it. So Team D is going to be taking home that 140 points for winning first place here. And looking at the full standings for the Eastern region, because we had Full Send and Sunsky forfeit their matches, they of course forfeited any points that they would be able to redeem there as well. So unfortunately 0 points for them, but we hope to start seeing them more in the future there. And comparing them of course to the Western region here, where next week we will be going back and seeing the best that the West has to offer here, Sour.